When Ghost of Tsushima released back in 2020, I was pleasantly surprised by its quality. It was unquestionably an open world game with all the trappings that follow that type of experience, like a few meandering objective types, some forgettable collectibles. However, when it hit, Ghost of Tsushima hit. Taking into consideration some of the best visuals of its generation, solid combat, and a few moments of that narrative that stuck with me long after I had finished it, and you've got one of the best games released that year and a standout in its own genre. And as if having a sick-ass single-player campaign wasn't enough, they went and released a free multiplayer component called Legends, and even back then I thought this thing looked awesome. But unfortunately, I didn't have anyone to play with, so it was just one of those things I never thought I would really get to experience. God, I was so lonely. I chalked up Legends to one of those things I'd probably never get to fully experience, but then, years and years later, I took an out-of-town trip for my best friend Nick's birthday. And on that trip, we were given some advice to check out a Best Buy near where we were staying, with the goal being that they apparently had a small stock of PS5s. Keep in mind, this was at the tail end of the PS5's availability issue, so we jumped on that shit. The intel turned out to be good, and myself and Nick walked away with 2 brand new PS5s for the actual retail price. This just seems like the perfect time to return to this too, seeing as how a PC port of the game will be dropping on my birthday of all things. Thank you, Sucker Punch, you shouldn't have. And there are some substantial rumors that suggest a reveal of a sequel to Ghost of Tsushima will be revealed soon. All of this, on top of me now having a friend to play with, I am beyond ready to jump back into Ghost of Tsushima Legends. Legends, simply put, is a looter shooter, except instead of guns, you're rewarded with different swords and items as you play. The loop is that, and only that. If replaying missions with different stipulations on harder difficulties to level up and collect better gear to do it again while trying to farm the best drops for your preferred build doesn't sound like fun, Legends will certainly not be for you. And I'll admit, when I played this game back in 2022, this wasn't the type of game that I played at all. It's very similar to how Marvel's Avengers progressed. That was my comparison at the time, but since playing Legends, I've been dragged down to the depths and have put a decent amount of time into Destiny. Yeah, I've alluded to it before, but my brother is the culprit for this recent brain rot. But in all seriousness, I've had a great time collecting exotics and especially completing raids. This type of thing is where multiplayer PvE really shines, putting a team of players, preferably close friends, into a tough challenge that requires constant communication and teamwork to beat complicated objectives. It's so much fun, and when these raids last over an hour and are firing on all cylinders, that's a great bonding experience for a group of friends. And you know, Nick and I are still trying to find time to continue playing Final Fantasy XIV, and we just made it to the Crystal Tower. Oh damn, I almost forgot what video I was making here. Anyway, Legends begins by getting you familiar with all of its classes, so let's do the same. Legends makes its characters by divvying up Jin's tools and moveset from the base game, but depending on the class you choose, you'll have a selection of unique class abilities and ultimates. Everything the classes can take advantage of helps to put them in unique roles, with variations on top of that to customize your playstyle even further. The Samurai is the most well-rounded class of the 4. They're the one that's most likely to survive a sword fight, with their first ability allowing them to passively drain health from enemies. And the second one is a buff to their sword strikes, occasionally even having strikes explode. Their ultimate sees them simply landing 3 strong strikes against enemies nearby. Good for some free damage, but not terribly unique. The Assassin is all about using stealth attacks, dipping in and out of sight to constantly get those free critical hits. Toxic Vanish allows them to go immediately invisible and poison nearby enemies, with their other skill, Group Vanish, hiding any and all teammates within the assassin's range. This was the class that Nick stuck with, and when he was around, I always had a means to quickly slip out the back if the situation got too hectic. And his ultimate was pretty similar to the Samurai's, the only difference being that he can actually choose what enemies are hit with the attacks, and I think the damage is proportional to the bonuses he had on his stealth attacks, but don't quote me on that. The Hunter is unmatched with a bow. Its abilities allow the Hunter to shoot deadly fire arrows or a concussive explosive arrow to interrupt enemy clusters, and the ultimate gives the player 3 free headshots. The Ronin is the support class, and obviously the one I stuck with. The first ability is a spirit animal that will attack and distract enemies. I dropped it after a mission or two. It's computer controlled, which translates to rarely useful. It felt like it only attacked one enemy before it went back on its cooldown, and one of its variations had it constantly emitting a healing aura, but again, it never stayed still, so it was annoying as a means of healing us. I ended up staying with the Ronin's second ability, the healing pot. Dropping this will leave a small area of healing that doesn't move around for you and your teammates to stand in. It came in handy on more than a few occasions. The ultimate is initially an instant heal. Everyone on the Ronin squad will instantly revive and or gain full health. I shouldn't have to tell you how important an ability like this is. And I also shouldn't have to tell you how satisfying it is to be the sole reason your team makes a crazy comeback. The other ultimates the Ronin can have aren't nearly as helpful if you ask me though. One just pushes any surrounding enemies back. I don't think it even does significant damage, if any at all. And the third one sets nearby enemies on fire, so yeah, kinda lame. Even if I don't care for the other Ronin abilities, this is something I have to commend Legends on. Every class's ultimate moves have these variations, and it lends itself to deep customization for every player's unique style. Fine-tuning my class's abilities was probably one of the main draws for me to continue to log back in, and this is without even touching on the ghost tools and equipment. As your character completes missions and activities, you'll acquire different swords, ghost weapons, and charms that come with passive bonuses to stats, and even cosmetics. All of these items, aside from the cosmetics, will have a level attached to them. The goal is to constantly have the highest level gear equipped because the aggregate of all these levels will determine your character's key level. The higher your key level, the higher the level of rewards you'll get from completing missions. This loot will all be randomized though, so in the early game, it's important to not get too attached to any particular piece of gear because it'll likely be replaced after the next mission. But this also means that the early game can be great for testing out all the different playstyles and types of equipment. Swords, for example, are beholden to one of the stances from the main campaign. The wind, stone, water, and moon movesets are isolated into individual swords. Maybe you'll find one that has a second stance that's built in as an added perk, but other than that, you have to choose your favorite sooner or later. These swords, just like all the other equipment you'll be rewarded with, come with other randomized perks and stats to even the playing field. Some might come with the ability to set the sword on fire, give it poisoning properties, or my personal favorite, increasing the perfect parry window. My favorite stance from the base game was always the water stance. That flurry of attacks you can do when you pause after the first heavy swing is simply goated. Loved it ever since. But towards Legends endgame, when I got Yoshitsune's hand, a water stance katana that increases the damage to my parry attack and also has the chance to set enemies on fire, that was it. I found my favorite sword. As you reach the endgame and you start getting items that you are actually really liking and their key levels high enough, you can start to reforge these items in order to get the perks and stats for your playstyle. As you could imagine, there's a lot of randomness to these rerolls for equipment, but obtaining new gear is so easy that it's never annoying. And using a piece of equipment you've dumped a lot of time into and having it be exactly what you need is a great feeling. I didn't find use for bombs in the main game, but in Legends, I mean... look at this. I'm just blowing dudes left and right.
There's gotta be a better way to say that.
And on top of that, I found a bomb that emitted a healing aura when I threw it down, so I could also heal my allies while simultaneously attacking enemies. It was a really fun system to figure out and mess around with, and the different activities were also great at giving these builds a playground to work together. The story missions are the main meat of Legends. You'll be replaying 9 story chapters until you reach a high enough key level to tackle the final piece of content, the Tale of Io. A 3-part raid we'll talk about in a bit. The story missions are very well constructed. I should stress, it's not anything too far removed from what you'd be doing in the base game mechanically, but it's all still remarkably solid. Chapters are broken up into 3 sections, each separated by a Torii gate to load the next part and give the players a small breather. Players will be asked to kill a certain group of enemies, find a certain item hidden in the level, free NPCs that are held prisoner, basic objectives that you've certainly played before. After the initial playthrough on the bronze difficulty though, each mission will house a few bonus objectives if you're feeling adventurous. Oni chest will be placed in one section of a chapter, and if both players agree to open it, a handful of strong enemies will spawn. Players will simply have to work together to beat the beefed up Oni, and the end level haul will be that much sweeter. The same can be said for the secret scroll that's hidden somewhere in the section. But these things can be extremely well hidden. Some of them take some effort to find. but the end rewards are worth it, as well as it just being a fun scavenger hunt. There is one new mechanic that I loved because of how much it incentivized teamwork. Enemies can be attuned to an element when you come across them, sun, storm, and moon attunements. And while they don't give any damage buffs to the enemies, they do offer defensive buffs. Luckily though, the players will also be able to find attunement shrines, enhancing the player's katana with that element. Attacking an enemy with the matching attunement will nullify their attunement, and this spirit bow available in some missions will also remove any attunement from the enemies if both players can hit them around the same time. Attunements are also put to good use in level design. There will be small platforms that will only assemble for a player holding its attunement, meaning one player will essentially have to hold the door open for their partner in these situations. Again, these small things aren't game changers, but they create tried and true co-op choke points. Stealth was one of the most satisfying things to use in the base game, and as you could imagine, it's even better with a friend. There are plenty of opportunities to use stealth if the two of you can coordinate early on. Nick and I are both huge fans of stealth games, and this definitely scratched the itch for us. However, in the later difficulties, enemies that would usually go down with one assassination, don't. If the text is replaced with critical strike, you know it's not going to finish them off. Even with Nick choosing the assassin, him having several bonuses to his stealth attack damage, we would both have to stealth attack the enemy to take them out. Luckily, that's something you can do. If both players are hidden, two stealth attacks can be stacked, for lack of a better word. It looks silly sometimes, but it remains satisfying to do. And speaking of stronger enemies, the later difficulties will have enemies with way more devastating attacks and health. I would say the legends can certainly be more difficult than the base game at times. Enemies have more hard to avoid attacks due to the supernatural elements of the mode, and players with their stripped back movesets have a bit of an uphill battle when compared to Jin's full arsenal in the base game. But if you ask me, that's what puts the biggest spotlight on the teamwork aspect, and this is at its most evident in the other modes. Survival is exactly what it sounds like. 4 players will work to hold control points against increasingly difficult waves of enemies. Points will be rewarded to the team after every kill, and even more will be rewarded depending on how many points are still under the team's control, along with how well they performed in general. These points can be used to buy perks for the team, like burning swords or healing for a short time. On the higher difficulties though, you better be ready for a fight. Surviving the nightmare difficulty was truly a feat, if we do say so ourselves. There were so many wipes for our poor little squad, but eventually we did do it and got some great rewards. There is a sort of versus mode where 2 teams of 2 work to reach the end of a linear level before the other team does. As they progress, they defeat computer-controlled Oni, which reward these points. These points can be used to send boss-level Oni to your opponents, disrupting them. It's a pretty neat distraction if you're missing a competitive aspect to this whole thing. But the entire reason you do these side modes or even play the story missions on a higher difficulty is to reach key level 100. After reaching key level 100 with a character, you can participate in the 3 raid chapters that concludes Legend's story. These are far and away the best content Legends has to offer. Each chapter requires so much coordination that Nick and I had to jump into game chat and talk with 2 random players, and it was a blast. We made 2 good friends and got to experience some of the coolest multiplayer PvE in-game content ever. I'm not kidding, this is up there with some of Destiny's raids. I'd probably even play this before I play something like the Root of Nightmares raid from Lightfall. The attunement platforms return, but now the platform element is not shown. Plus, all 3 attunements are used, forcing players to be coordinated as well as fast when jumping across them. The traversal in these raid chapters were worth it alone if you ask me. But that's not even the half of it. The team often has to split up with players completing tasks on their own so everyone can move forward, fighting tooth and nail through larger scale battles. These are legitimately a sight to behold. Going out of your way to explore and find the multitude of Oni chests hidden throughout these chapters. If you've played an MMO or a live service like this before, these are nothing new, but I have to stress that Tales of Io is one of the better raids I've played. And I won't spoil too much for the fight against Io herself, but it's intense. A great ending to Legends as a whole, but that's just the thing. After defeating the last chapter of the raid, that's it. There's a harder version of the raid that unlocks, but it's not new content. Thus, we see my biggest problem with Legends as a package. Its content feels lopsided. It's interesting and fresh when you start the story missions, testing out mechanics and tools with a buddy, but once you finish those 9 chapters, you're stuck doing repeats of those 9 chapters. Or survival, or rivals to grind, essentially. It is cool that the story chapters have higher difficulties where enemies and objectives get remixed, which I understand is kind of the whole thing about MMOs or a live service, but it can't help but still feel like filler. The goal is ultimately to get to the highest key level to do the raid chapters and beat the final boss. With those last first 3 chapters being hands down the best content in the game. There are puzzles, optional challenges, and cool combat scenarios everywhere. But to get to that stuff, you have to spend days replaying tower defense missions. If you're on the fence about picking up Ghost of Tsushima for PC when it comes out, I would absolutely recommend it. I made a video on it back in 2020, but I definitely wasn't as good as I am now at doing this, despite what you might think even today. But still, if you want more information on the base game, feel free to check out the card in the top right corner. The PC version comes with the Iki Island expansion that I actually haven't had the chance to try out, as well as Legends. Even if it's sold for a full $60, I think that's a great deal. Legends will take you and a group of friends a good 2 to 3 weeks to plow through, I would say, and for a free addition to an already great game, it's so worth it. Just be prepared for that grind because it can feel very real towards the middle part of the journey. Sadly for us, Sucker Punch have confirmed they're done with Legends. Even still, it was so worth coming back to, even if I do wish they had plans to continue it. Fingers crossed, maybe we'll get something even more fleshed out in the sequel that's rumored to be revealed sometime this year. I don't think Legends will change your life. It's nothing that Destiny or Warframe or whatever is already doing, but it was really fun to experiment with my build and see the spirit realm depicted within Ghost of Tsushima's engine. Still, one of the best looking games I've ever played by far. I can only hope the footage does it some sort of justice, but this mode is drop dead gorgeous. The red lighting everywhere, the way these environments look, oh my god, the scenery up in the sky if you look up, oh my god, oh, and their particle system, they put that thing to work here, and I couldn't get enough of it. I said it in 2020 and I'll say it again, Ghost of Tsushima is one of the prettiest games on the market, even more so with these PS5 enhancements, and I can only imagine how much farther the PC port will push it. Here's hoping it's not a, Last of Us Part 1 PC situation. Yeesh. I know this seems kind of strange to release this video now of all times, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense. Ghost of Tsushima was just confirmed for a PC release and all that, and if you've been following this channel since late 2022, you might remember me saying at one point I've had this video on my backlog since then. So, with the PC port just getting announced, the script collecting dust in my Google Drive, and it already being a relatively short video, I couldn't think of a better way to start my break from school. But yeah, I think that's it for now. I do want to say thank you guys so much for not going anywhere while I get my life together. I'm sure I'll make a dedicated video to explain all the details when I finish the last half of my program, but I had just been so unhappy in my career as is, and it was time for me to make a change happen. That is, until I can do this full-time, So, I'm gonna get back to studying and finishing the Baldur's Gate 3 video. Hopefully I'll see you guys soon with that. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching, so thanks for stopping by, and have a great day.